Hello again, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the channel. So, there was one person that did sort of crop into my sphere, as it were, ladies and gentlemen, when I was investigating quite a number of people I wanted to do videos on here and there. And one of them, ladies and gentlemen, was apparently a guy called Andrew Ditch. Now, here's something you should know. I know absolutely nothing about Andrew Ditch except for one thing. And this one thing is going to be something of a difficult one to sort of like explain for me, because it does impact, because apparently the information I got seemed to suggest the idea that Andrew Ditch was faking autism for what? I'm not entirely sure. Was it for clout? Was it for views, monetization? Was it for respect? What exactly it was about, I'm not entirely sure, but let's talk about this properly. Now, now whether or not any of these things fall in line as regards of Andrew Ditch, I do not know. But what I will say this, just that headline on its own, faking autism. Now, it's probably no secret that Andrew Ditch is probably not the first person to ever have done this. I'm pretty sure somebody, back when I used to watch Internet AJ, he covered a story about a guy who faked autism. I'm not entirely sure, like, what the point of it was. I think he just sort of did it for clout, or just for people to feel bad for him. But here's something you guys should know. Yes, I am diagnosed with Asperger's, but here's something you guys are probably not prepared for. This is a really interesting concept, is that anytime anybody has just ever asked me whether or not I have autism or not, if it's not for official reasons, I would always say no. I would always tell people that I do not have autism or Asperger's, and I'm going to explain why now. You see, ladies and gentlemen, is that take it from the perspective of somebody who is on the spectrum. Let's do it like this. It probably doesn't occur to some people that there are people out there who are embarrassed, ashamed, sensitive whenever people call them out and say that, oh, this guy has autism or has Asperger's. Of course, it's going to affect people very, very differently. I remember one occasion where I was about 17 years old, and I went on a very rare outing with a few of my friends from high school, well, from the sixth form, I should say, and somebody just straight up casually sort of oversaid in his hearing that he has autism, doesn't he? And I remember from that point, the jig was up, and I basically left and was almost considering not worth venturing for excursions of that sort again, because people will, that's the thing, is that it's, to me, that sort of thing stuck out like such a sore thumb that it didn't even seem worth being associated in their presence anymore, because obviously I was just going to look weird no matter what I did, and that was going to be the end of it. And bear in mind, this wasn't 9 weeks ago. This was 9 years ago when this happened. And I only remember that insofar as remembering how hurt I was afterwards. And I kind of always thought to myself, if just anybody just straight up asks me, I'll just say no, because and just say that maybe I'm just a little bit quirky and a little bit different, but that doesn't mean to say I am this, that, and the other. The same thought probably doesn't even occur to people that there are people who are autistic, and they seem to be under the impression that people are absolutely fine with saying it as it is. Now, here's the thing as well. Maybe it's curious, because no two are ever going to be alike, and I've known plenty of autistic people in my time who have no issue if people openly say that you are autistic in a group or something like that. But some people definitely do, because it's quite a personal thing. It's a thing that I unfortunately have no control over. I have no way to say, I have no feasible way of saying I'm not, because what, and again, you see the reason why I lie in like these sorts of situations is because it's probably a little bit more in my interests to convey the idea that I'm actually quite normal when I'm around people, and I can be normal around people. It's never a question of I choose to be quirky, awkward, or weird on purpose. Whenever people seem to think that I just am different, it's not because I do it out of spite. People like that don't do things like that out of spite. I mean, earlier today in work and stuff like that, I felt like a series of conflicting emotions about just things that were going on in my life. And it just kind of made me feel like I didn't really want to care at that point. And I get this all the time at work as well and stuff like that. Some people will openly voice, they'll say that they think I'm just weird and awkward. And it's on them and stuff like that. Some things I say I think are completely legitimate and real, but again, it's just because that's what I think. It doesn't automatically make it true. If you see what I'm going for, which is kind of interesting. Again, why I might want to look into Andrew Ditch particularly rather closely, because if there's a logic, if there's a rationale to the reasons as to why Andrew Ditch fakes, autism. Now, I have no reason to suggest this is even true anyway, so it will be interesting to go into this with a completely clean slate. But as I've said before, I don't do it because I want people to, because it's important for me for people to think I'm normal, and that any ideas I have are just ideas I've come up with. Now, and that's again the very interesting part of my life, as far as I know, as I get older and older. Do any of the significant things happen in my life? Are they in any way related, or do they correspond whatsoever to my condition? Like the fact that I can bench press 30 kilos at the gym. That's not really, autism doesn't really have anything to do with that. So, what's the point in bringing it up in relation to that? You know what? I come up with like hundreds and thousands of ideas for stories and for like plays and movies and stuff like that. And I can even memorize like nearly 50 odd shows from beginning to end off by heart. But is that got anything to do with autism? Or maybe I just have a really good memory, or maybe I just take things on board in that way and I store it in the back of my mind. Has autism got anything to do with that? It's actually quite interesting when I think about it, that what exactly do I even know about what I have? I honestly I'm in two minds about whether or not I should even find out at all, because one, it's not exactly as if it's going to change anything. All it's going to do is make me understand it. But here's the thing. Maybe, in the words of the famous song, the more I see, the more I know, the more I know, the less I understand. I know fine well that what I have, I don't need to understand it. Maybe it's just a question of more or less, is it necessary, and does it even matter in the long run? And school as well is one of the I suppose really the first thing that really brings to mind this point of view is what it was like in school. Now, if you were like me, or perhaps maybe you didn't have this sort of luxury, is that when I was doing my GCSEs and then eventually my A-levels, students that I'm just going to say require extra attention. And when I was in school, we didn't have a great deal of students who required extra attention, but there were people that did. And guess what? It's just a good sign of just of how concrete my memories of school were, because I pretty much got along with a lot of very different people when I was at school. And to be honest, they were absolutely no more different or any less or special than I was. It felt like an actual meritocracy in some ways, is that We were all very individual and we all had aspirations above our stations anyway. But getting back to what I was saying about exams is that we would sort of like just have an entire separate room for us to do our exams in under exam conditions. And it's something about we would require like extra time as well, something like by an extra 10 or so minutes. And I cannot begin to explain or really bring home to you guys how much I almost begged not to have these. It sounds ridiculous. It sounds ludicrous, but I didn't want to be treated differently. I'm just putting my hands up right there. At school, in that sort of environment, I did not want to be treated differently. Because, one, it wasn't fair to the other kids, who were in the big exam hall. They were being observed, for every single movement they did for nearly 2 hours at a stretch. But here I am, wondering to myself, you know what, I studied, things with a lot of the guys that were in there. I say guys, I went to an all-boys school. And it's not fair on them, and you know what? They call why and it's not a question of I didn't think let me try this again. It's not a question of me wanting to use my extra being not. It wasn't a question of me being associated with that crowd. It was a question of, is it really going to make me do better in my exams? And if it doesn't, then why can't I just, be in there with everyone else? But I suppose this was a sort of thing that they sort of already decided was out of my control anyway. And in fact, a lot of this could even be worked out to how I just behaved generally at school. I was literally one of those kids who would basically, if somebody would call me out for talking too much, there would be a concerted sort of gasp a little bit, because they'll be thinking, wait, you mean him? What did he do? And I was like that friggin' quiet. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. It was just, I have witnesses, and there's no reason to suggest why it. And bear in mind, they also call onto the fact that if people sat next to me and stuff like that for like math class and like science and stuff like that, they would do relatively well in what they did. I mean, okay, here's the thing. When I was like year 7, so I was like between 11 and 12 years old, I was one of the best students in my class at geography. And I sat by a lot of people who I kind of knew for the next few years. And certainly when I was studying geography, I just came up with idea after idea, new ways to tackle these sorts of questions, and answered them creatively and with a fair amount of cohesion, which, if you're new to this channel, is going to be a big surprise. There is nothing really cohesive about this channel whatsoever. But that was what the atmosphere was. That's what the feeling was like, and yeah, it was phenomenally strange, even looking back during my time at school, to suggest that I didn't really. And bear in mind, I didn't even know I was diagnosed until I was 15 years old. Well, what I mean by that is I was diagnosed when I was 2 years old, but I didn't find out what it technically was until I was 15. And by that point, it was too late to do anything about it, so why should I be concerned about it? I mean, it wasn't exactly as if, and here's the thing as well. Maybe it was in the best interest of my parents, like, not to let me know at that point, because even younger than that, when I was like 8, 9, 10, 11, I always consider myself a very happy child, and well, what's wrong with that? If your child is happy, smiling, and just engaging in life by degrees and learning more about the outside world, well, there's nothing wrong with that either. And it's a joy, ladies and gentlemen, that I did have that sort of that point of that time in my life where, looking back, I couldn't have been any happier, and I felt loved and cherished by my friends and by my family. Which is why, ladies and gentlemen, it is always worth bringing it back to the fact that I was probably very privileged and very fortunate to have this sort of that sort of childhood and that adolescent period. I mean, yes, I faced things when I was a teenager and stuff like that, but who doesn't? That's just a part of growing up, and you don't really need to have autism to work out that there are things that don't make sense and we don't understand why we can't make them make sense. It's not a question of we don't want them to make sense, it's just some things are too nebulous to even all the way through the ages to come up with an answer for that. And nowhere does this come home in the idea that there are people who are probably on the spectrum who have it far, far worse. People who are incoherent. People who have difficulty, speaking, writing, or even just spelling their own name. Then, of course, you come to some people who are almost completely non-verbal. Some kids who get flustered and obsessed over the most trivial of things. Then there are some people who are just not particularly very happy about why life is the way it is. And that maybe they are owed quite a lot more than probably they ever had the right to think. It's when you come to stuff like that, and again, I've told you guys this before, but my dad worked in education for 40 years. You learn some things just by using your eyes. Is that some kids just don't enjoy going to school. There are some kids who just don't enjoy things that they have no control over. There are some kids, and this is like very, very particular, there are some kids who face abuse at home. They face abuse for who they are, and they face abuse from everything that they come across. And it makes it worse because they have no idea why they are facing all of this, and it's not normal. It's not normal, and it's not there. Again, I remember once I was watching like an episode of Kitchen Nightmares. It was if you know this one, it was called Greek at the Harbour, where this son Aris apparently said some dumb things at a party when he was a teenager about how he didn't really want to work in his family's restaurant, and Gordon Ramsay like really picked on Aris and all that by saying, why would you not want to work here and stuff like that. Everyone seemed incredibly hard on Aris for no other reason than the fact that, well, why on earth? Why are you pointing all this at Aris? He doesn't know any better. He was a teenager, and maybe he just wanted to find his own way in the world. It's hard to when the restaurant business was literally all he ever knew, if that makes sense. And there are some people who have that mentality as though, why on earth are you picking on me if this is all I know? I'm not doing things on purpose. I don't say things to do anything like that on purpose. I say them that's just because what I think and what I know. That's just who I am. So hopefully what I've tried to explain in this video is about probably the reasons why, if asked, I would just say I don't have Asperger's. I've also talked about a little bit about my experience and how, in hindsight, it's kind of spectacular that if any of those sorts of resources are even available today in schools, and that I consider myself extremely lucky only in the knowledge that there were probably just as many kids who are going without, with considering how much I was sort of loved and cherished and stuff like that. But then so my reason is just because from a more social sort of level, I wanted people to understand that I wasn't getting an advantage from this. I wanted to be treated like everybody else, equally and without any special rules or anything like that. And that's kind of brings me onto the subject of perhaps maybe in relation to Andrew Ditch, What is it about why did he want to lie or fake having autism? What's the reasoning for it? Was it because people would treat him differently? Was it because he wanted to seem actually just kind of different? Is it because he thought that that's the idea of normal? It might be one of those things, it might be all of those things. Or it might be something a little bit more sinister. Maybe. I can't exactly say for certain because I don't... Maybe that's what I should do. Is I should just do a video about Andrew Ditch and see why all of this stuff has come about. Because I think there's something else going on about a topic like this. Now, originally, I was almost considering following this up by also doing a video about Christian Western Chandler about autism. Not like another quickie reading of that same article, but also just to... it would have been a very difficult one to have done because it's... Do we talk about what we know or probably what we didn't know about his time in school? Or how the fact that it's what counts as Chris's misunderstandings of the world separated from things about his ego? Well, we don't quite know, but I certainly want to spend a bit more time finding these things out. So expect that video to come very, very soon, and I cannot wait to sort of view you guys again in the next video. Take care, and bye-bye for now.